Um, it is April 27th. It's a Wednesday, April 27th, 2022. At the moment, I'm watching Jano Lieber from MTA in New York City, in support, of course, of what he's saying. I know that we've already had monumental builders that came pre-descendant, in almost a preamble. My son tonight came home with some American survey, I think, is how I would read it. I was trying to read it with discerning eye, trying to discuss it with him. Attention span, though, in this area with the frequency band that we're in, holding that thought and getting them to really take an in-depth look is very difficult at the moment. But again, that's more matrix bound than genetically whatever. I'm looking at this piece that they put on by the 7. It has NYPD involved in it. This is an 8 between 2 sticks for street. And it says the George Washington Bridge. Now, here's what happens in the city. What I've been noticing. It says fare evaders by the MTA. Put this out. $500 million is what it cost taxpayers. That's what the story is going to say. But there's what's right, what's just, what's fair for the founding father and the children and the predescendants and the ancestors thereof that may not have bounds within, maybe they do, maybe they don't, by ancestry. But they sure look like it by what the paintings and the relics are that were left in a place for a larger. The Mouseketeers said all for one for all, someplace. But then there's the FAIR, evaders of what's fair, because of some new influx, some new voice, some new satire that is really costing a lot more than just tax dollars. It's causing sacrifice of service, sacrifice of lifestyle, sacrifice of freedoms that were not agreed upon, but has been brute force numbers. I watched something earlier today. There was a man, he had a similar story to what I can't fully recall on my own. I watched his story in horror. His name is Naval New York. Navalny. And then, that's how I remember it for my own whatever. His first name's Alexei. So he's part of the lexicon. So, but he sits in something called an opposition, and I'm not getting into that because whatever. But it brought up something that they call FSB wherever he is. I had never heard of it. Being in New York, the Big Apple, and being in a problem area. And being held separate than the rest of the population in whatever that was supposed to be. Neither good nor bad, just isolated, I suppose. He got hit with nerve gas or nerve agent on a plane, out of nowhere. and it had a signature on it was Novichok, was a signature on the substance that whoever, whatever, hit him with. I had never heard of this. Never made my headlines. Never made the nightly news. They've been really silent within the United States of America. Tonight I also said to my son, I said, it's really interesting because this North American, this United States of America, says right now, tonight, the paperwork came home saying that America has the United States Constitution, and it was built by our founding fathers, mine included, along with my sons, at de Fleur de Lis, of the Meadow Children. And there was, while I was young, there was no word of a king in England. There was the Queen of England, but not a king of England. So that's confusing. But even the American papers and the Constitution and the U.S. papers were confusing. So right now, while everything's under attack, I don't know if it falls into the hands of the descendants to defend what's left of their freedom and whatever was built prior to us getting here. But this fair evaders and what's fair and what's not, I'll tell you what's not fair. What's not fair is having a whole lot of Manhattan children who are well-fed, well-clothed, and in some part of the benefit of an American system and culture and whatever, while my sons and I have not enjoyed such luxuries, freedoms, or liberties, and then to find out that they're somewhere in the world where they actually, you could get on a plane and get hit with this nerve agent. I mean, I had never heard of it before. Tonight they legitimized it for me. I'm just like, oh my God. And he was convulsing or whatever. These are things where you go down, and unless somebody tells you you are hurt, you have no idea. You have no idea who's involved, if it's being investigated, if you're going to be okay, if people are still looking for you, why they even did it in the first place. So here's what Jano Lieber confirms was already in place.
About $500 million.
And here's the question for you. How will stopping fare evaders make public transit any safer? Eyewitness News reporter NJ Burkett is live in Lower Manhattan with much more on this discussion. NJ.
That's right, Liz. The MTA chairman said today that controlling fare evasion is one very important way of controlling violent crime. There's no...
Oh, so being fair, right, and just, and controlling that process is so uber important because it dictates the lower ward of crime that goes on.
Question, as you know, that major felonies are up underground and that crime is surging in the subways. Police deployments have been stepped up, but how those deployments are being utilized is raising questions.
Transit officials insist that most violent crime in the subway begins with fare evasion, that many of the people who commit major crimes underground enter the system illegally.
So the crimes they commit underground, when they're admitting themselves in illegally, leads to larger network crimes. Interesting, because after this, there's something that just happened at a local New Jersey, state of New Jersey, university that I was taken to, and again, no memory of the visit there with a friend that I had from high school, which was a Catholic school at the time, which did not teach us of which hands to hold in that institution. There was no reinforcement of like knowing who our leaders were in the institution of Catholicism. But Rutgers had something that they came out with today about holding Palestine flags, and there were people hanging out windows, having this huge big thing down there. And then I go to the weather report, and I'm like, now they've been here and they've been going to the local institutions within the corridors of, like, say, MIT and technical schools and engineering schools and all this stuff, phone lines and internet and contracts being gone into is a huge area of frightening whatever. And then the weatherman shows some things that he says they're locked out of in, like, it looks like tunnel service of a different whatever. Coincidence? I don't know.
MTA Chairman Jano Lieber.
The fare evasion enforcement does pick up criminals and people with weapons before they get into the system. It's one way of interdicting people who would commit crime. And over time, the knowledge that there is fare evasion enforcement, we hope and expect, will deter the bad guys from coming into the system to do crime in the first place.
Lieber has urged the NYPD to crack down on petty crimes like fare evasion.
Oh, did he say petty crimes? That's an interesting use of that term, because we don't have petty officers that I'm aware of. We have NYPD officers. But again, I'm not in their system, so I'm not real sure what language they're running their outfit by. I did ask, however, today, on the back of their service vehicles, they put a red line. There's red tape. It's electrical tape. It's red tape, and they put it on their back windshield. I asked this morning what it was for, or what it represented, if it was NYPD specific, or if it was a communal, like, Bayside thing. He said that it was for FDNY. I said, is that to honor the officer that they lost? He said, yes. I said, thank you.
And to keep the homeless from sleeping on the trains. An enforcement effort that he insists will make the system safer. The NYPD has stepped up patrols underground, but transit officials say more officers need to be visible on the platforms and on the trains. Mayor Adams is taking it a step further, insisting officers are spending too much time looking at their phones.
Too much time looking at your phones. With all those really distracting maps and tunnel features and all sorts of new toys, gadgets, and gadgets that they hide that not everybody has access to, jailbroke phones, and all sorts of black market data collectors and things. Oh, it's a real nightmare out there.
All of you who take the train, you know you...
So now, do you take the train or the training? Which one is it? Are you taking the actual metro subway? In London, they call it the underground metro. Or I think Boston, they call it that too. Or are you doing some kind of underground tunneling service, trying to steal people's phones, data, the pathway? Because biologically, it's really dangerous in this area by weather, because it affects the weather. It just does. That's just the word for it. We eat her. WEEATHER. Weather.
Apartment issue phone.
Now this is interesting, because now Pat Lynch, who's the PBA gentleman, says that NYPD officers have their own home phones, pretty much, that they're walking around with. They don't have departmental issued and followed phones. Now, where this comes into play is when you all were at scratch pads, pen and pencil or pen and paper, there was a layer of self-protection. Once you start buying iPhones made in a 5-letter glyph, that may cause scary things internally for health, for whatever. Then all of a sudden, now it becomes even more difficult to gain back the system that's been compromised. And the safety at a whole nother level. It's like all of these small breaks are happening in the glass at the same time and contributing to big pressurized points.
Their phones. We just can't continue to do that.
The PBA president insists that officers didn't ask for department-issue phones and that they are a requirement for the job. Quote, "We are now required to document every minute of our tour on these phones. Every form we are required to fill out," he said, and every...
Now, my question to FBI level after seeing the 60 Minutes the other day is, does that make it easier for the counterterrorism things that have to keep being opened now that everything is being documented inside of a city that is not nationally secure because of the equipment that's being enforced illegally? I'm just curious.
alert we receive comes through the phone. If there's a problem with cops using the phone on duty, NYPD management should change the policies and go back to pen and paper. End quote.
Well, transit officials revealed today that police officer MetroCard data are giving them real-time indications of how the officers are using the system, how they're patrolling underground, and how they're riding the...
Yeah, right, okay. Alright, so now here's a flag that's being flown at one of the area colleges that I don't know how they're picking the attendance here and under what laws they're conducting themselves under, because it seems that it's really frightening to be training people in these tunneling things and taking away without people really knowing what's going on. Why would they be educated here?
For the latest on Jewish students being harassed, the mysterious and trouble.
So now it says Jewish students targeted. I don't know what that means. All I know is this is the square rectangle. Oh, this is the rectangle. And this is what's sitting outside the car and waving it. But I have no pretext or preamble as to what happened right before this image.
Incidents targeting members of a Rutgers fraternity, what the university is telling students to do.
Plus, bringing back Summer of Soul will tell you about a new festival in...
Oh, this was the preamble to my birth, right before 1978. This is what was going on. Also dangerous, also still not cleaned up.
In Harlem, inspired by Questlove's Oscar-winning documentary.
On a programming note, the 2022 NFL Draft.
Now going back to technology, by the way, the rectangle that they showed with the flag on it, this is what's on the door below. And this is what's on the building above. Again, I don't read those letters because those are Greek letters. So I don't know if there's more than one Greek. Oh, and then there's this up here. I just noticed while I was studying the photo, but I don't know anything about this. Now here's what I've been tracking and following, more important news for my children and myself, and my health that's deteriorating. Again, there is document and file of how many times I've been hit and with what kind of agent, and then just put back in like nothing went on. No story about it, no memory of it, no anything. Which is even more frightening. But this is what I've been tracking. I've been tracking the lines coming down in force because I don't know if if they are some kind of back channel, some kind of subsidiary channel. They're not in a main tunnel, but they're just pulled, like teased off, and they're just almost like fiber optic needles going through the air. And then at some point, if the threads are large enough, they cause some kind of friction. But the curtain of what level they're hitting the human anatomy physiology in my area seems to be very low to the ground. It seems almost like they're purposely lowering the area that they travel through. So it purposely goes through, like around the thymus and the thalamus and the liver area for some reason, to avoid proper metabolic whatever.
I mean, the Windy City's at 39. At least we're in the 50s right now with sunshine. As we go through the night tonight, windy conditions, clear skies, dropping through the 40s into the upper 30s. Your wind chills sub-freezing bottom.
Now this is what really, today, this weather pattern changed. They're showing here, tunnel inside tunnel, and then they're showing this outer tunnel that snakes up and around. And I was looking for the magnet changes after that. But again, they don't normally show the news program with this level of whatever. But again, if it's like a myelin sheath on a neuron that has the coating still on it, as far as a physiology wiring, there's some level of that just outside. This one seems to be traveling in a closed loop circle. I heard one of the local kids mention in the park about something called supercells. My son's not learning about that.
Tomorrow morning. Why is this all happening? Upper level low pressure in the atmosphere right here, parked over northern New England. That's a very cold pocket of air in the upper atmosphere. We're really chilly. All the warmth is just to our south and west. We can't unlock it just yet. Along with that chill, cloud.
Can't unlock it just yet. That's a really frightening term for the predescendants and the ancestors, and what's being affected at the moment in these areas. But I wasn't guided into technology school or engineering school or any of those levels of career paths and pathways to success in the way that New York State was handling my birth here. Just 1 second. So it is star 1978, star 8378, Nicole, Cattaruzza. It's Earth, Solar System, Milky Way, Universe, Galaxy is broken, and it's Bayside Station, Bayside, New York, 11361.